Ready to begin? Okay. Call to order the Design Review Committee for the City of Cotati for June 15th, 2017. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Present.
Vice Chair Weaver.
Present.
Committee Member Glendening. Present. Committee Member Lampert. Committee Member Langberg. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We have, first item, there's approval from the minutes of the October 2016 meeting and also approval of the minutes from the May 4th, 2017 meeting. Taken in order here, are there any comments or corrections regarding the meeting minutes from the October 20th, 2016?
I have a comment. And reading through the notes, I think that it's not really important, but just to make sure that it follows my recollection. On packet page 6, it says that I was the one that brought out that the treatments were uneven between the front and rear side elevations and should be evened out. And that committee member Connell agreed, but I think it was reversed. I think that committee member Connell brought up that point, and then I agreed. So, just to clarify.
Any other comments on those minutes?
Mr. Chair, committee member Glendening, could I ask you to point that out to me again? I'm sorry.
It's on page 4 of 5 of the minutes, but packet page 6, it starts the discussion about the color schemes, and then it goes to the level of detailing regarding first the duplex buildings, that the treatments are uneven between the front and rear side elevations and should be evened out. So I think committee member Connell first brought that up, and then the same point was made about the rear and side of the other units, that all the level of detailing should match between the front and side elevation.
Okay, thank you. We can make that change.
Any other corrections or comments on the minutes? I just say let's go through the next set of minutes, and if there's comments on that, I'd like to approve them both as a group. But are there any comments about the May 4th, 2017 minutes? I think I have one on page 3 of 4. I think I was the person to make the motion about approving preliminary and final design, but I can't recall. Just please check that out from the record. Anything else? Is there a motion to approve the minutes from both meetings?
Actually, I would suggest actually that we approve them separately because I feel like I have to abstain from one set because I wasn't present for the meeting, but I can approve the other ones.
As do I. All right. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of October 20th, 2016?
So moved.
Second? Second. Please call the roll.
Chair Morgan.
Abstain.
Vice Chair Weaver.
Aye.
Committee Member Glendening. Aye. Committee Member Lampert.
Lampert is not here.
I'm sorry.
Connell.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Mike Connell.
Mike Connell.
Yeah.
Okay. Committee Member Connell.
Yeah, aye.
Committee Member Langberg.
Aye. So, approved. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the May 4th, 2017 meeting?
Sure. I'll move to approve those minutes.
Is there a second?
No second.
Please call the roll.
Chair Morgan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Weaver.
Abstain.
Committee Member Glendening. Aye. Committee Member Connell.
Aye.
Committee Member Lambert.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there are no changes.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is I'd like to open the meeting for public comment for, is there any member of the public who wishes to present public comment on an item not on the agenda? Please come forward. Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public comment. Thank you. Now we go to the next matter, which is the matter at hand, item 1, which is conceptual design review of a mixed-use development consisting of 11 multi-family dwelling units and approximately 11,675 square feet of commercial space on 0.85 acres at 120 East Cotati Avenue. Is there a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Community Development Director Parker here. This is a little bit of a different format for us, the way we want to handle tonight's or this afternoon's meeting. We wanted to bring this project to the committee at more of a conceptual point in time. The applicant submitted for a pre-application review, which is a precursor, if you will, to a formal application. So the project has not been conditioned. It hasn't gone through environmental review. We're here with this group strictly to get feedback on some of the specific design issues and generally how well you think it implements the goals of the DSP. So the applicant is looking for feedback tonight before they submit a formal application. So it's a little more free-form than what we typically do, and hopefully a little more fun and informative for everyone. I do want to point out a couple of things in the packet. We have 2 additions to the site plan, to the plan set that you'll be looking at. One of them, the electronic version. One of them is the addition of the sheet that's on the wall behind you, which shows the street section that we'll be talking about, La Plaza, excuse me. And the other one, we have a new sheet A1.1, which is dimensioned to illustrate that the project does indeed meet some of the setbacks, the side yard setbacks. When I wrote the staff report, we were working off of a plan set that didn't have those dimensions yet, and so just scaling errors were clarified, and the architect submitted a plan that showed that. So what you in the audience see tonight electronically will vary with those 2 changes. Everything else is the same. Specific, and I'll show you specifically as we get to that point which setbacks are now accurate. So just briefly, as you said, Mr. Chair, the project is 2 separate buildings on 3 legal lots. The first building, Building 1, is the one at the corner of La Plaza and East Cotati, and Building 2 is the one at East Cotati and Charles Street. And Building 1 at this point has 6 residential units and about 6,700 square feet of commercial. And Building 2 is 5 units and about 4,900 square feet of commercial, so a total of around 11,675 square feet of commercial space. And one of the reasons that I think the project is important, and Lauren, if I could ask you to shift to the staff laptop, we'll advance through the plan sets. One of the reasons that I think the project is important is that very prominent location, specific to the, or central, I should say, to the, I'll just point this out now. This Building 1 is the building here at the corner. This is La Plaza, Old Redwood Highway, and East Cotati. And Building 2 is the one here. And central and very important feature of the downtown specific plan is the ultimate reunification of the 4 segments of La Plaza Park. And that's shown in the plan, one of the specific plan sheets that I included in your packet, and it's also in that sheet that's on the wall behind you. But the idea being that the 4 quadrants would at some point be reunified, and La Plaza Street would serve as the main circulation route around the reunified park. And so that makes this location even more prominent than it might be today. So just ask you to keep that in mind as we go through. As I said, what we're really looking for tonight is, of all of the number of plan sheets that I sent you from the downtown specific plan, hopefully you had a chance to look through those and just get an impression of how well you think the project addressed the various goals. And I'll go briefly through the minimum standards that we looked at and point some of the issues out for you. Setbacks, height, parking, street improvements, and the floor area ratio or lot coverage component. With the setbacks, the building setbacks, I should say, so the plan has both building setbacks and parking setbacks. And both buildings meet the setbacks required, and this is a good time to point out that the applicant desires to have the La Plaza frontage for Building 1 be considered their front setback, which, given the goals of the specific plan, seems appropriate. With Building 2, the applicant desires to have East Cotati Avenue serve as the front setback and Charles Street be a street side setback. And that brings us to probably one of the big central design issues is how do you marry those, a side yard and a backyard setback together in an urban type development like this. So it's important probably also to mention that these, because they are separate legal lots, the applicant could propose just one of these projects at any time if they desired to. We'll hopefully be processing them both at the same time so that they can inform each other, but just to let you know, there is no requirement for them to submit for both. So we want to be looking at the 2 projects the way they are, and then the way they could be if done separately, if that's possible. So if, given those front setbacks, or excuse me, those front property lines, the buildings do meet all of the front, side, and rear side setback requirements. For height, the height limit in the planning area is 35 feet. The building as depicted is the majority of the building, excuse me, the majority of the roof plane is at 30 feet with some tower elements that go from 38 to 40 feet. This committee could make a recommendation to the Planning Commission to exceed the height limit by as much as 8 feet for those type of elements. Not the entire roof, but for elements of the roof. So as depicted, the project could qualify for that additional height if the committee chose to. Floor area ratio is one thing. So far, we've got, in my mind, the first issue of how do you marry the back and the sides of the project. The second issue, does the committee feel that the tower elements are appropriate to ask for that additional height? Third is the floor area ratio. And for this, I'd like the project architect who's in the audience tonight, as well as the applicant, to give you a little feedback on the challenges of implementing or designing for that floor area ratio, given all of the other development standards, specifically parking. I think the downtown specific plan obviously assumed that there would be structured parking or at least tuck under parking, and that's how they were able to achieve both the requirement for the parking spaces and the floor area ratio, but I think that's a good topic for discussion. And then parking. this is the correction that I want to make in your packet on page 14. If you look at the table at the bottom of the page, I've got the side street setbacks for both buildings listed as 10 feet, and I have Building 1 proposed at 6 feet and Building 2 proposed at 8.5. With this corrected sheet that you're looking at right now, those the architect has dimensioned those in this drawing, and they do both meet that 10-foot setback, so that setback issue goes away. The only issue that remains with parking, which I think, unless the architect tells me I'm wrong, I believe the only issue that really remains is the tiny little section in this corner that doesn't meet the parking setback if calculated by the 20 foot of average depth. And we can have that discussion. The other design issue that the architect addressed in this sheet that's in front of you tonight is the backup space that was previously, these parking spaces were right against the side property line, and I pointed out in the staff report just that didn't leave room for actually maneuvering out of those parking spaces, and he's presented in this plan sheet an option for that, to accommodate that. And then I think the last thing I want to say about parking is that the land use code allows for vertical mixed-use projects to qualify for a parking reduction, and this project has been designed to qualify for that. It has been designed assuming that parking reduction would be granted. They actually have over the number that would be required, but that would be required with the reduction. So that's a topic that we can certainly discuss. On the access for the project, this Building 1, first off, you can see that the projects are designed to share access and parking if needed. This Building 1 has one street access point on East Cotati, and Building 2 has this access on Charles Street, and then they both could share each of those individually if deed restricted to through the development process. Both police and fire have concerns about, police and engineering have concerns about left turns out of this driveway. And as I said in the staff report, those concerns have mostly to do with the future improvements that are identified in the general plan have a signal at Charles Street, and they also have some restriping of left turns onto East Cotati from southbound Old Redwood Highway, as well as some minor restriping for East Cotati westbound and southbound on Old Redwood Highway. So the combination of all those turning movements in that relatively short distance give both those departments a little anxiety about left turns out of the development. And there's been no final determination on that. We would require a traffic and circulation study to be done with the project that could verify that or provide mitigations for that as appropriate, but that is an issue, and the applicants are aware of that and may have some additional thoughts this evening to share. And I think actually those are the only specific comments that I wanted to make as an introduction to the project from the city staff review side. And the applicant's architect, Mr. Henry Wicks, is here tonight, and I think he wanted to, present his thoughts and design concept ideas to you. And so with that, I'd really like to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Vicki. My name is Henry Wicks, Wicks Architecture, 4849 Old Redwood Highway up in Santa Rosa, California. new faces here. I haven't presented before this board before. Lars, you look familiar from maybe an AIA meeting or two, but I started my practice in 1994 after working as an intern and getting my architect's license while I was working at Soul & Palmer Architects in Santa Rosa, if you recognize that name from years past. They kicked me out, said, start your own thing. You're working on all the projects that you've got it going on in the office right now anyway, and we'll support you in your endeavor to run your own firm. So 94 till now, done a wide variety of project types, do pretty much everything except for public works type projects. Don't have the staff to handle that type of project, but enjoy what I do. I'm blessed to get up every day and go to a job I like. And when I get a project like this, I'm doubly blessed because it's could be a landmark building in a city that could be the up-and-coming city of Sonoma County in terms of its redevelopment. I like the design goals and objectives that are in the downtown specific plan. I think it's a pretty well thought out plan, and we've tried to adhere to those rules and regulations stated in it. I want to thank Vicki for working with us. What you have before you that you're looking at is a culmination of 7 months. We started this in November last year, 7 months of planning, working with Vicki and her staff on trying to pull together all the elements, help us understand what the DSP was all about, try to implement a good plan to bring before you today, and hopefully in a few weeks get it back in and make the formal application so you can make some rulings on it. I can take you through kind of my design thoughts and my process developing it, but as Vicki said, I hope we can make this a session where you can ask me questions, make it a little more free-formed than a standard protocol meeting. So let me go through some of the plan concepts and designs and where we started. Having done 10 iterations of this, we've had to blend a mix of what the DSP requires, how many parking spaces, how many units we can get on it, how much leasable area we can provide in the buildings, and then also provide the parking to accommodate those. That mixed with good design and a budget. We have budget constraints, and we brought a contractor on early on in the process to help verify our designs versus railroad construction cost, and then melded those into a pro forma to make sure that the project's viable. It's great to get a project approved, but if it can't get built, it's all for naught. So this is the site that was put before us is unusual in shape, not your standard rectangular shaped lot. It's almost an hourglass, and this pinch point was one of our difficulties. One of our early on design concepts, we had all the parking in the back of the building, but it oriented the building all towards East Cotati. And my reading of the DSP, and if someday the La Plaza is reconfigured, redone, and any of the 3 or 4 multiple scenarios in the back of the appendix, you guys are probably familiar with it. There's some different options for reunifying La Plaza. I thought it was more important to orient the building on the La Plaza streets section, and we actually looked at maybe extending it down even further, but as it sits now, we've got 3 parcels, this rectangular parcel, this help me with my geometry. Trapezoid, thank you very much. We got 2 trapezoids actually, this trapezoid and this trapezoid. And then doing a little history, these were all divided into smaller lots. This was 6 lots at one time, this was another 6 lots, and this has always been 1 lot. But we thought that with the reunification that we should try to orient the storefront. I'll show you the elevations later where all the storefronts are all oriented towards La Plaza and put the parking in the rear. And that gave an opportunity for, as development continued, that everything would be oriented towards La Plaza. This side, most of the street traffic will be east-west rather, and some minor traffic flow along Charles Street as what we've learned is kind of a cutover street. But we've got kind of two fronts there, but it seems logical to orient the frontage and the majority of the storefront glazing along East Cotati. Both rear accessed. We like the octagon shape of the La Plaza, and we replicated that in the two tower elements that anchor the building. The shaded area, and I don't have it before you, but during our formal application, we'll present the carports, covered parking as required by the ordinance for residential parking. Vicki talked about, we added a little hammerhead turnaround, also for emergency and fire equipment. If you get down here, you don't have to back all the way out. We'll designate one spot as a turnaround area. Can I move to the next slide on here, or down arrow?
Before you proceed, can I ask a quick question?
Sure, you can jump in anytime.
Because I'm having a hard time visualizing it. The parcels that you're looking at are the ones that right now are completely undeveloped. You're not taking away any of the existing buildings that are in that vicinity.
No.
Okay.
And from our research, it's been vacant since the 1950s. There hasn't been anything on there.
And just for flow here, and your interjection was a good point here. Let's keep it a discussion here. I was sort of expecting a presentation, and we're kind of flowing in the discussion, so we're in discussion now.
All right.
Okay. For the committee, too.
Done
All
with
right.
presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, please. This is building one, and these are potential demising walls that have their own each individual storefront door access. It'd be flanked by glass on each side. There's about, I think it says 15 feet. Don't have my glasses on, but it's approximately 15 feet. And this trapezoidal corner space would be accessed underneath the tower pair of doors. Circulation, second floor, even though it's a minimal amount of apartments, still required to have two sets of stairs. This stair would have an elevator, so all the second floor units could be accessible. We've designed, jumping over to the floor plans, we've got four two bedroom, 2-bath units, approximately 1,100 square feet-ish, nice sized units. But all the restrooms and kitchens are all designed to be accessible. Two kind of custom units. We take advantage of that octagon-shaped tower in the ceiling area. They all have private outdoor spaces with attached balconies. Building 2 is very similar, but less square footage. We've got probably two tenants in this building. Again, 2 staircases. We've got 5 apartments above, 3 very customized units, and 2 one-bedroom units. Again, elevator access, accessible units on the second floor. This back stair, we changed the design on this, and it is reflected in your current packet, where this would be more of an exposed stair with a metal trellis on the outside of it to allow greenery to grow up on the outside of that. This is building 1's exterior elevations. This is the La Plaza elevation, broken into kind of 4 segments: the tower segment, secondary segments, and a primary center section. They all have mansard roofs on them. It's kind of, we liked Cotati Inn has that kind of effect where they've done a mansard roof with a straight edge behind it. While trying to pick up on some of the elements and character of Cotati, we formed it into a more contemporary version of today's designs. Lots of articulation, lots of movement in it. Gave you a taste of a couple of the exterior elevations rendered. This is the Charles
this is Charles Street, and then this is East Cotati. And then from La Plaza looking to south on La Plaza, and then this is eastbound on Cotati. We added this drawing primarily to show one of our dilemmas, and one of the hardest things in our design solution was trying to figure out how to address the DSP versus what we've drawn, and show the board what the implications are of what's in the DSP. This is an excerpt that's taken from this area right here. On this, our frontage, I just turned it 90 degrees. And what it's depicting is one-way traffic, two lanes of one-way traffic, and back-end diagonal parking. It assumes that this road access behind the existing building on the corner of Old Redwood Highway and La Plaza would be cut off. Another building built adjacent to ours, and then our buildings, building number 1, that is, in front. And then on the opposite side would be parallel parking along the park frontage. Overlaying that onto the real-world site plan, a 20-foot depth for a pedestrian way, the diagonal parking again, the 2-way lanes of traffic. You can see how much of that parking change affects the existing park. It'd look very odd if we did it and were required to do it in our project. What we're proposing is to set the building back, the maximum we can set it back by the code, which I believe is 8 feet, and that still gives us a 13-foot pedestrian way, parallel parking in the front, and the existing 2 lanes of traffic would remain, and the diagonal pull-in parking would remain as well. Our project wouldn't be affected if this was implemented in the future. It would just, our building would be back 8 feet more than it needed to be. And I thought about asking you if we could move the building forward in hopes that this would be done, but I think we're okay either way, depending on what your feedback is on this particular issue. While I'm here, I didn't mention it on the other one. There's a bus stop at this location, and we're working with transit on, and gotten kind of a thumbs up that we'll get it moved onto the East Cotati side. That's kind of all I really wanted to point out in the discussion, and would be glad to answer any questions and try to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you want to stay up there for a while, I guess.
Stay right here.
For the committee, anyone want to start it off here? If you have some questions, comments, feedback?
I'll start. So first of all, I'd like to compliment you in general on just as the site is really complex and the downtown specific requirements are complex. And so from a design standpoint, I understand what you have gone through. And I have a lot of little specific things, but in general, I think it's a pretty darn good plan. Couple concerns, and going through the checklist of the requests of DSP plan-wide policies, and I think in general you meet most of them. The one that stands out is the very first, that to ensure that public open space is integrated, and there doesn't seem to be any public space on the site. So that's just one question I have. And that's probably the major one, actually, just for starts.
My interpretation of that, and and I could be way off base, but I think the integration of the open space is the park and how we open the project to the park. I glossed way over on the FAR issue that Vicki and I have been discussing, but it's extremely difficult in a downtown, particularly this downtown requirement, to maximize building and parking and have additional open space. Let me go back to the site plan. If you took it to your interpretation, the only open space that we have is this area, and we'll probably use that for bioretention if we don't do some sort of on-site paving, bioretention underneath the paving. So my interpretation is how to integrate the open space within the La Plaza district, and it kind of further bolsters my argument that we're trying to orient at least Building 1 towards La Plaza rather than having everything oriented towards East Cotati.
And from a staff perspective, I would agree that with Mr. Wicks that is probably the crux of the open space issue from the plan-wide perspective. If you look at your packet page 19, that it's an illustrative plan, but it actually ties back to the text of the plan where certain open space areas are identified as critical to, or I shouldn't say critical, but they were the ones that were planned out for sort of an equal distribution of open space. So the areas that are depicted as landscaped, so the reunified La Plaza Park, the site of currently of St. Joseph's Church at some point because of the size of that property holding and because of some of the plant species that exist there today. There's the idea that maybe that could be an enhanced wetland area. And then finally, as you get up closer to Highway 116, there are some smaller town squares that were envisioned in the plan. So I would agree with Mr. Wicks that the open space issue here is how do you address the interface with the park and how well is that done?
I see that and I agree with that now, and also agree with you as far as that little pocket park or triangle that exists, that not trying to move the parking into that and to preserve that is probably an important part of it. One question for staff is, what is your envisioning of this unification of La Plaza Park ever happening in our lifetime?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a difficult nut to crack. It's currently, I think the streets carry too much traffic volume to comfortably be accommodated on La Plaza. So without a series of other regional projects that took some of the regional traffic off of both East Cotati and Old Redwood Highway, it would be very difficult to reunify the park quadrants and expect that La Plaza could carry that volume in any kind of way that didn't wreck the surrounding inhabitants, the folks that live around and do business around those streets. So it's certainly still a goal that we don't want to prohibit it from happening, but I don't see it being implemented certainly not in the next 10 years.
If I could, question on traffic, and I think it's more to staff, but listen in here, that you raised in your presentation that there are concerns by both police and engineering regarding left-hand turning out of the space between buildings 1 and 2. Let's talk a little more about that, but because that may be also would be any improvements to East Cotati which would prohibit that. But the question I was thinking is there a similar concern about left-hand turning from westbound traffic into the property?
Yes. I think the westbound traffic is more easily accommodated because the bulk of the restriping and new geometry, if you will be the old Redwood Highway side of that intersection point or that driveway point, the point where the driveway intersects the street. But the street section that's included in the DSP has a median in East Cotati, and that's one of the major questions is it even possible to implement that median, that planted median? And that, to me, will drive a lot of the conversation about whether there could be left turns there. Ultimately, the plan, along with the traffic work we did with the general plan, would have the signal at Charles Street, so all of the all the people that are destined for the project could turn left at Charles Street and then right into that driveway. So we're hoping that they can have westbound left turns, but we don't have the traffic and circulation study yet to show whether that's a safe turning movement.
Okay. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, just to tag on that one, I live on Ross Street, and just right now, turning left from Charles on to East Cotati is difficult at times of the day, so I can't even imagine turning left out of that spot right there. I agree with my colleague about not chopping off that little park bit for more parking. That would just make, it's already a small bit, it would make it even smaller and look weird, and yeah, I would say not doing that at this point in time. I like the towers at the corners. One thought I have about the parking for the mixed use comes from my experience with my own mixed use building, and that is we didn't design well for the back for the retail tenants to be able to move product into their spaces from the back of the building, the width of the doors and how all of that makes it very difficult for some of my tenants have to actually try and schlep their deliveries in their front doors, which also aren't really designed for it. So that's just, looking at the widths of the doors and the widths of the doors into the retail space and the elevator or stairwell that kind of looks like it's right up against one of them made me wonder about that for those commercial tenants.
Each tenant space would have its own separate door away from the residential, and they'll either be single doors as depicted, or I think you have a good point, double doors, maybe more in order for deliveries. That's actually the back of house electrical for the entire facility. The residential would have its own private entrance and exit, not to be used by the commercial. The commercial door would be on the other side of the stair tower. So that's our thought process, trying to keep them a little bit separate from each other. No conflicts between residences and commercial.
They need
big doors. Got it.
Anything else?
I think that's it for now.
Yeah, I have some comments. I was wondering about well, first off, I'd like to say that I think plan-wise, it works pretty well. I mean, I agree that that plan-wise, the layout, it's complicated, and I think it's done a good job of meeting the basic requirements it had to meet. So that part, I think looks pretty good. I have a question about, well, back to plan-wise. I have one comment that just looking at it from when you're driving down the main drag, which is
East Cotati.
Yeah, East Cotati. But between the buildings, I was just thinking about when you're driving by, when you look in, I think to me, it seems kind of important that you plan for what that visual is, if you're just driving by, so that you don't just look in on parking. And it looks like there's going to be room for landscaping there, and there's that little finger that comes out that could have a tree. I was just thinking that I wouldn't like to see these nice buildings that are fronting the street and doing what they're supposed to do to create this streetscape, but then when you're driving by, you look in and see asphalt and parking. So I think that just needs to be controlled and planned, which it looks like you're doing, but I just want it to be, I'm just hoping that it will be thought about. And I'm not saying that it hasn't been, but just a comment. Then the other thing I was thinking about is wondering about, of the four, I think there's the 4 different architectural styles that are given as options. So I'm assuming that this is a version of the Main Street commercial?
It is.
Okay. 'Cause
Storefront, Main Street
Okay.
commercial.
Because when I was first looking at it, before I even kind of reviewed what these styles are, and I saw the arches, I thought, well, maybe you were going for a modern Mission revival. So that was my first reaction, was that it seemed visually a little bit severe. And one thing also, just looking at the plan-wise, I'm hoping that the spaces along the sidewalk will be accommodating to people feeling like there's little nooks, or there's that it's not just so straight that it just feels like you should just keep marching along. You know that sort of interaction space. And it's, so that's my comment. Overall, though, I think it works really well. I think it's a good plan. I like the towers as an element. But again, to me, it's a little bit severe in the just sort of straight facade. I like how the way you've oriented, I think, is great, and I like how the when you turn the corner onto Charles, it's like you're recognizing that's a different use across the street, and so that becomes sort of a setback area. So anyway, I think overall it's great. I just have a few comments about maybe the Main Street commercial and how that's interpreted, and just that it's a little bit severe to me.
Yeah, when we come back and do our formal presentation, I'll address that specifically.
Okay.
I'll have some tighter vignettes of these spaces, and you'll see that this column element actually is out forward of the
Right.
storefront that's behind it. So you'll get a shop space feel, and they're unique enough. It could end up being one tenant. We don't know what the market's going to look like, but it probably most likely will be four tenants running along there. And I think there's enough visual separation and enough difference and enough in and out movement, which I'll demonstrate better the next time I see you.
Okay.
That will accommodate that feel. It'll have a shop space like you're walking along Healdsburg Main Street, or some of the own downtown in Cotati. There's some movement in some of those buildings. I mean, they're distinctly different buildings, but we're trying to incorporate that feel with this design.
Okay, yeah, I realize it's early in the process, and it's hard to, it's kind of hard to say something that might be taken critically.
I have thick skin,
But, okay.
really thick skin. You're
Okay.
not going to say anything to...
Okay, good. Thank you.
I've heard it all too before. So, anyway, but anyway, when we do the full dog and pony show, we'll give you a 3D rendering, kind of a drive-by, so you can see that open space element that came up earlier between the buildings and how we're going to infill it with some nice landscaping. The bus stop's going to visually impact that a little bit too. But you also see the back side of that tower element that is really the elevator and residential staircase. That was a secondary thought. After we got it modeled, we thought, why don't we play that up? Because you do get to see it as you're driving down East Cotati, and it creates a little visual interest. It's like, what's in there? You know, kind of.
I have one more comment I just thought of when you mentioned the staircase. You've done the wire staircase then on the back that's open?
On Charles Street.
Yeah, so I was thinking that maybe that should have a roof on it. I mean, it looks pretty vulnerable to weather.
We could do that. We were thinking of trying to give that elevation a green element, a real nice vertical green element, and we didn't put a roof on it because it will truly be a secondary entrance exit. Most people are either going to go to the elevator, not necessarily take the elevator, but it's the closest adjacent to the parking.
Oh, okay.
Adjacent. It's really for emergencies, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask a follow-up question for Committee Member Glendening. I appreciate those comments very much. One thing that we haven't talked about yet, and I don't think the design team has had much opportunity to think too deeply about it, is stormwater treatment facilities. So I'd like to go back for a second to that space between the buildings on East Cotati. And I like the way you put it about making those an interactive space or a space for interaction. So oftentimes we end up with bioswales that are planted without a whole lot of interesting land. Some of them are beautiful and some of them are not such interesting plants. So I just wanted to get you to expand on that as much as you can. Maybe you don't have specific things in mind, but we certainly don't want that for folks to be driving by and see an open parking lot. And so I think we're all thinking that it's going to be filled in with relatively tall-ish, interesting landscape materials, but I just wanted to make sure that's what you were thinking, and how if we end up with some stormwater, some bioswales in that area, that we don't preclude that from happening. So I just wondered if you had any other thoughts given my questions.
No, I think that sounds appropriate. I think I just wanted to mostly make the point that that is something that needs to be planned and shouldn't just be something that happens by accident. That's not thought about. That was pretty much it.
One thing that I have seen folks do in different cities with downtown parking areas is to sort of create an arbor type over the entrances, and maybe there's a short little fence that continues that growth. That came to mind for me, given the space between the two buildings, as something we could use to create sort of courtyard parking as opposed to lot parking, if that makes any sense. But I'm not a designer. I don't want to recommend that. But if that is something along the lines of interesting landscape that you might want to also see some depictions of, that would be a thought. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple comments, questions, there's much for staff, I think, as Henry, but I appreciate very much the effort sort of from both of you of the long-term view and creating that street front on the plaza. Is there plan, or is there actually capacity now of public parking in the city? You referenced that there may have been thoughts of structured parking when the plan was considered. Is that in the cards at all, or?
There are isolated opportunities. When the plan was developed, it was adopted in 2009, so that was prior to the demise of redevelopment. So central to the parking working as the, Park Once concept was that there would be a structure, and it's not, the location of it's not identified in the plan, but there are references to a parking structure, and I think largely for visitor parking. I think that is definitely off the table. I don't think the city would ever have enough bandwidth to build that. We do have one more parking lot, one more city-owned property that is intended for parking, which is 2 blocks from here. But it's only going to yield probably about 25 spaces or so. That's just a guess. And so the concept here is that projects get to count the street parking that they build. It's also one of the reasons that the DSP developed a grid, which isn't showing up here, but if you get up to the northern gateway near where the Olivers project was proposed and past downtown auto body, the plan introduces a new grid system, and one of the basic reasons behind that is the new streets not only provide access to the backs of the parcels, but they also become parking opportunities. So I think what we're doing right now is trying to find the best solution project by project that makes sense for it. So I'm not sure I answered your question, except to say there's no longer, really a grand solution of a parking structure. So I think each project will struggle a little bit with how much street parking can we add with this project that makes sense, and how do we best design it. And I agree with the applicant's designer that trying to implement the DSP section would not benefit either the short term, wouldn't benefit their project, and it wouldn't benefit the city in the short term. So.
Okay, thank you.
Were you asking that in terms of FAR and?
Well, I was asking to ask a question. If you, in your design iterations, if you looked at more building on East Cotati as a way to create that front, like you're doing on La Plaza, instead of having this big gap between the two buildings, could it be more building across there? And my assumption is no, because of the parking. But you're over the minimum that's allowed with the reduction. So any chance I have in my spouting off to have less parking is what I will always advocate for, because we design cities for people, not for cars, or at least that's what we would like, even though it's actually pretty much been the opposite. So things like a one-way street of La Plaza in the plan is not a good concept for a downtown street. My office is in Sebastopol on the one-way street, and it's a nightmare. It should be 2 ways because it's for people, it's not for cars. So here, too, I think if you went down to the minimum parking you could have, could that give you more building space even, and give that frontage, a similar urban frontage that La Plaza, you're achieving on La Plaza? So I don't know if you looked at that, or it just, it's sort of a question comment.
Yeah, we would love to maximize, I believe we'd love to maximize building area to parking, and at least have a good balance, and or less parking, if parking structures were created. We could get closer to that 2.15. But the other difficulty with 2.15 on this site would be we need to go taller, two stories, 35 feet. It's not going to get us a third level with reasonable commercial space on the ground level and 9-foot ceilings in the apartments.
Right.
So that's our delicate balance. I mean, our parking's. I'll take this front building as an example. We've designed it for the 65, 70-foot retail space that retailers like for good portion of back of house, and then most of the display and stuff in the front. So that you get that dimension, you get some sidewalk buffer between that and the parking, and your parking at 65 feet or so. We've taken up the whole lot. So our on-site parking is defined as a maximum, and then the numbers of apartments kind of play into the parking ratio of two units, 2 spaces per unit. Is fairly suburban.
Okay.
The parking reduction helps that.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
If it was straight on 2 or 2.5, where we've had to deal with in some other municipalities,
Yeah.
wouldn't have a project.
Right, exactly, yeah, okay. No, that all makes sense.
If there was some, we have looked at that, but we just didn't want to push the envelope. We didn't know kind of how you guys would react to larger building, maybe just a little bit less parking than some people may feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I would like that. I think it addresses even, what the other members have already brought up about the view from East Cotati. Just that becomes a more unified street front going all the way around the corner. So that's just a sort of preference on my end or comment.
If I may, we try to keep our meetings to an hour. We are right at that time. And I'm just looking to the committee. We want to go a little longer in this? Say up to a half an hour?
I think we barely scratched the surface.
Okay, well, I want to just check in and okay, so I can go to 6 o'clock personally, but.
That sounds good.
All right. Please continue.
Mr. Chair, could I
Yes.
interrupt one more time? To Committee Member Langberg's comment just now, I think doing a quick back of the sheet calculation here with 11 quote-unquote extra parking spaces, so the difference between the allowable reduction and what they've provided, you could do one more dwelling unit and about 3,000 square feet of commercial if you just continued the mixed use concept over. So that's about where you'd end up.
Okay. I'll segue that into the use idea for the commercial space, that in the specific plan, there's a point LP6, housing and office over commercial space is preferred. So is there any sense that instead of having sort of typical retail spaces, which as we know are becoming somewhat endangered, would it actually be better to have more office space or even housing downstairs as a kind of like live, work, studio, that kind of space? So again, it's sort of a question as much to you, Vicki, as to Henry. But
yeah, that really gets to the heart of a consistent comment that we get about the DSP and Cotati in general, which is we've had a couple of economic studies that show us that Cotati is just not an office market. Given the supply that's in Rohnert Park and especially Sonoma Mountain Village, that Cotati's office market is, with the exception of individuals that want to be here for this reason or that reason, there's not much there. So we have a little bit of a challenge with that and with, as you said, this endangered status of retail. So we're really struggling right now to figure out what those uses really could and should be. There's only so much need for, maker space and, professionals like yourselves that want to do live work and that kind of stuff. So we're actually in the midst of, we have a consultant that's been hired to help us answer that conundrum. And so maybe the use discussion can get a little better defined as the project goes through. And we may come back with different proposals for the uses that would require some significant amendments to the DSP.
okay, thank you. I have just one other architectural question about the bus stop, which is, to me, kind of more of a craftsman style. It's a giant bus stop.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I just, as I drove here, I sort of came that way just to see the site again, like, whoa, that thing's huge, and so have you thought about that interface? Like if you're not proposing a craftsman building, which is good, but but you have a sort of craftsman-esque, multi-layered thing in front of your building. I'm just curious if you thought about that.
Well, our intention is to move that and put a new bus stop in between that area. Would not be our intention to do that. There's already another one just like it on the other side of Old Redwood Highway.
So, want to go around again?
Well, first of all, the points that both Lars and Sally made were on my mind as well, so just to emphasize that that's as far as the facade and as far as the massing. Those are both concerns of mine, and it seems like that could be, obviously the facade is going to develop further. I haven't delved into this is my first downtown specific project to look at, but just looking through the images and looking through your imagery, they don't seem to mesh in terms of just some of the examples. So I just would take a look at that a little bit in greater detail when you start working on the windows. But going to the massing and going to narrowing that gap and moving the building around, it does seem like pretty much a natural if you're high on parking and low on mass to increase the mass and reduce the parking. I mean, so it seems like an opportunity for the developer and an opportunity to have more space to lease or rent, and also addresses that gap. One question I have, I guess, for staff is, can the two buildings or properties be treated as one so that more parking can go on one, or if there's an intent from the developer to just perhaps build one, then we have to meet that requirement? Is there any leeway in terms of flow between the two parcels in terms of, if you put more mats on the corner or on the lot one and had less parking there, if it's restricting the entry, or if we just need to work with that entry? And then I think also, in understanding Lars, I think maybe can you do a one-way, since exiting out of onto East Cotati is problematic in terms of going either direction, would it be okay from circulation, from staff, to just have an entry on that point, and then you would exit off of Charles, or potentially exit adjacent to your walkway into the building off of La Plaza? So I guess that's just a question: are those fluid items for the architect to address?
Yeah, and those are good questions. What I think the worst, quote unquote, worst case scenario for them would be a right-in, right-out only on East Cotati, and then full turn movements on Charles Street. So yes, they could circulate around in that way. It's just that folks that were coming from Old Redwood Highway would have to go down to Charles Street and come in that way, as opposed, or I'm sorry, the other way. People coming west on East Cotati would have to turn on Charles Street and come in that driveway instead of making a left turn across traffic into the East Cotati Avenue driveway. So yes, that would be the worst case, and I think the turning movements could all be accommodated. It just wouldn't not be as easy as if full turn movements were allowed out of that East Cotati driveway. In terms of sharing parking and access, that's the challenge that the developer is going to have to make sure that they address, and that is if the parcels are dependent on one another for parking numbers. We love it when projects share parking because there's an efficiency there, and it means that both parties are more interested and you don't end up with boundary issues. So we love that. The challenge for the developer will be that if they're counting on shared parking and one of the projects doesn't go forward, then they can't get building permits because they'll have insufficient parking. So the developer needs to answer that for themselves and see how to best address it, given that there are two ownerships involved. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, I have a couple more things. One is actually probably more for staff, which is, so you've mentioned, Vicki, about there being a plan for at some point a traffic light at Charles Street. Is that like would be going in as part of this project, or are you talking farther down the line, or?
Yeah, it's, excuse me, it's one of the build-out improvements that's identified in the general plan, so it's part of what development projects pay traffic impact fees. This would be one of the projects that would get built with those funds. The issue then is always timing. Does this particular project drive the need for that to be installed before they open? So we don't know the answer to that yet. But we would with the traffic study that's done with the project.
Okay, okay. My other question, I seem to be obsessed with the whole egress and the ingress and egress of the retail people. The packet mentions that you already have a tenant for one of the retail spaces, a laundry. Which building is that going in?
If they go, it would go into building 2.
Into building 2, so that's the one up there. Okay. Part of my wondering around that has to do with thinking about pedestrian traffic, people coming into businesses walking versus the kind of errand you do where you have to drive. And so laundry generally, you got stuff. So figuring out how that's a different kind of traffic flow versus people walking in and out of stores. Okay, I think that's it.
I have a question regarding the environmental review. I understand that it's not yet done, but I presume you'd be tearing off the EIR for the specific plan. And I guess the second part of that is traffic's an obvious one, and aesthetics as well. But is there any other issue that you expect to encounter when you look at that?
Answer to the first one, yes, we'd use the EIR that was done with the DSP and just look at the differences. Traffic is the big one. The other one would be biology. The site is it's in the mapped habitat for CTS and some of the plants, so we need a bio report just to tell us what's up with that.
Okay. I would comment that, and I haven't heard anything to the opposite of this, that the height limit, as mentioned here, I feel like I'm being fed a line here, that the towers fall within the 8-foot discretion of the committee and could be recommended for approval to the Planning Commission. I think that would be something that personally I would recommend to the Planning Commission, because I think the roof line with the towers and all of that, it looks interesting, and it is a larger structure and more consistent than everything around it. But that would certainly break up the eye. So I would personally think that's a good idea from my non-architectural viewpoint. So, and we haven't really talked about the parking issues within the site. You mentioned a hammerhead spot. I kind of got that. I don't hear any concern about that from anybody here. But if you like to elaborate on that just a little bit, for the committee, it would be helpful.
The only thing that I would like to add right now that I didn't is to say that even though it is a pre-application process, we did route this to the fire district, and they looked at the shared access and looked at the length of the driveways, and so far have not said that they had any problem, have actually said that it's fine, so in the affirmative. So they have a sense of it being a safe design.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Vicki. You were talking about some changes maybe being attempted in the downtown specific plan to give some more flexibility of uses. Do you think that that might ever extend to allowing residential on that ground floor? It seems like that could be an option in this particular case if the laundromat didn't go in. It seems like on Charles, residential units might be appropriate on that side, or even possibly on the other side. It just seems like it would give it an added flexibility.
Yeah, I think given the housing needs in the county and what we've been hearing for years about retail and commercial in Cotati, that's definitely something that's on the table. The issue becomes then how do you fill the funding gap that the taxes that are raised from retail were supposed to provide. So that's part of the analysis that we're in right now. But I do think, I agree with you, I think some, sort of Georgetown townhouses right there would be really beautiful.
Okay, I have one more question, and then one more time around here if anybody, you apparently do have something. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, very good. In listening to the discussion of setbacks and with the new figure and all that, I want to be clear in my mind that it seems as though the issue of setbacks has been resolved, at least at this level of design.
Yes, I would say they have I think the front setback issue on building 2 with the 20% of the average lot depth, that's the only one that remains, and it looks like we've cleared that one even in here, and it's just such a slight change. I'm sure it could be refined through final design.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, just one final thing. In relation to building number 1, in relation to the existing building to the south and your south elevation of that building, is that currently a residential building? And I presume there's a plan for that to eventually become commercial, just in a city's long-term plan? Or is that an office building, or what's it being used for? And secondly, to that, the facade that's drawn is fairly elaborated, and the actual facade and plan has no windows. So there's a difference between the plan and the elevations of your submittal.
If I could, through the chair, I'm sorry, I was making a note. You're talking about the property that's immediately south of Building 1?
I'm talking about the property immediately to the south and the south elevation of Building number 1.
Okay. In terms of uses, and we actually have that property owner, or here in the audience, yes. I believe everyone would love it if that property were included in this development plan. It doesn't seem to be a possibility at this point. So in answer to your specific question, yes, the uses and the design, everything about the plan is consistent for that property as it is for these. So everything that here's the property owner now.
And so just to follow up to that, then, if that building is to remain for a period of time, essentially the plans show a blind wall and the elevations show an articulated wall. And so which is the submittal? Is an articulated wall or a blind wall?
Well, I'd love it to be articulated, but, sorry. I'd love it to be articulated and 50 feet over, but the plan now would be to take some of that articulation off, either plan for it to be another building of two-story butted to it, or we set the residential units back 5 feet from the property line to give it the articulation that we're showing. Keep the commercial space at the blank wall level so somebody could build a, infill downtown project next to it. Good catch, though. You're looking.
Yeah, I was just sort of reading back through the DSP, different more zoomed out policies, with one of them talking about creating a variety of housing types to serve all economic segments. And so I'm curious as to whether these residential units are intended to be rentals versus condos, or like how is that, or have you even gotten that far?
At this point, rental units.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else?
Actually, I don't have any more comments, but just are we open to public input?
Who's getting there?
Okay.
I wanted to kind of get this discussion to a spot here, but at this point, yes, you were quite right. I would like to open this to public comment on this discussion. If you are a member of the public, please step forward, identify yourself. Please. Yes. You're a member of the public. Please come to the mic.
My name is Kay Baker, and I am very happy to hear that we're going to improve that La Plaza, because it's long enough that we should make Katari a beautiful little town. Anyway, I own that piece of lot that right now it's a friend shop. It's, I think, 8192 La Plaza, right next to the lot they are going to build. I have 50 feet wide, 150 feet deep to the back. Okay, when they built, unfortunately, if we didn't build together with them, do we have a line 3 feet each to build or not, if we could not share the wall together? It won't look nice, because if you have 6 feet between my building, my lot is just so narrow, 50 feet. Couldn't afford it to get in another 6 feet. Is that able to solve the problem? If will make a lot nicer, because you see this size of the plaza is all nicely together like that. So what do you think? Are they gonna build on the line, or they have to get in 3 feet? Or I have to get in 3 feet. What is the problem I could solve? I couldn't afford it.
I understand. And I'm not sure anyone here has an answer for you. I would direct that to staff, and also in stating your comment. That's part of this discussion about where we go. Vicki? Do you have a response to that, or a thought, or?
Yeah, I think a brief response would be that obviously any project that was proposed on Ms. Baker's property would go through the same process, and so we'd be able to look at the interface of the two buildings. Mm-hmm. There will be, and Ms. Baker and I have had this conversation, there will be challenges for her to develop a project given the size of it, that it was platted originally as a residential lot, and so it's really hard to develop it with the standards of the DSP. So I think she's aware of the difficulties, and that's driving some of her concern. But the short answer is the side yard setback in the DSP ranges from 0 to 10 feet. So within that range, any number of configurations could be proposed.
Am I, based on what your concern is, and I'm going to direct that to Director Parker, but is the issue here, I put it more specifically, is the issue that, are you concerned that because of this project, you're going to have to do something? Or you want to do something with that project? I'm unclear what, okay.
I want that spot to look nice. Everything's all in one street instead of cut open 6 feet between, you know. If they had to give in 3 feet, I had to get in 3 feet. How could we do? Unless we share the wall together, you know what I mean?
I think so.
Yeah, so I don't know what the city council, how do you think about that? Will look a lot neater and nicer, you know, but I bought it just only that house. That's it. That's the time on the market.
Okay, thank you. We'll
Take that as a cancellation. What should I have to do? I would appreciate it.
Continuing to work with the staff on this is
Yeah.
what I would recommend.
You understand what I'm trying to point out?
Can I
Yes.
try it?
Well, if you want me to, I can real quick. I think what's being brought up, I think the 3 and the 6 feet is the building code setback requirement from the property line. The architects can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that may be what's driving, which is the building code setback from property line is different than the zoning setback of 0 to 10 feet. So it could be that the best project design for Ms. Baker's property would have a building sitting next to this building, and that separation between them would be, the requirement would be 0 based on the zoning, and would be what the minimum and the minimum of that would be what was required from the building code. So it certainly could be that there's an odd space in between the two buildings, which is one of the reasons that, from a staff perspective, we would love to see this property brought into this development application, but we cannot require that. So I think the short answer is there is no answer to that, what that might look like, but there's also the short answer that you would not be required to do anything in order to accommodate their project. Right. They need to take care of it on their side, and you take care of it on your side, whatever that means.
Yeah, so I thought, you know, for try to avoid the problem in the future, we should have some, you know, nice decision to make that spot look nicer and smoother. That is why I brought up now. So, you know, just a thought. Okay, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public? Please come forward.
I'm Lindsay Johnson. I am the property owner of the residential and commercial, the shared, I guess, 2 sides. My question would be, what is between my property and the parking stalls is what I'm seeing?
Would you mind just pointing that out? I'm not clear where. Thank you.
And right now there's our house on it. And my concern is I have a 2-year-old. You know, is it going to be a see-through fence? Is it a gate? Is it, I don't know, what kind of retaining wall? We have a lot of college kids. They do Thursday night crawl. They're there all weekend. They use properties as toilets, let's just say. And I'd hate for that shared space to become a party area or a hazard, or I don't know how to explain it other than I don't want this to become a problem on my property since we're sharing so much space.
Yep, please come forward, yeah.
Well, I can tell you what the requirement will be, which is a wall. It would be a minimum of 6 feet.
Yeah, I think wall fence,
No fence, wall. It separates commercial and residential, so it has to be a wall.
Okay.
We're going to build as high as we could ourselves, so.
Okay.
We can find a happy medium, that's great.
and there'll be on-site security cameras. I mean, this will be safe. There won't be college kids partying in the park.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And again, you understand that this is a design discussion, essentially. This is not,
Oh, yes.
we're not approving this. We're not at that stage yet, so.
Yeah.
But thank you for your input.
And I'll just say, living on Ross Street, I feel your pain. They party in our place, too.
Is there anyone else, another member of the public who has a comment on this? Please come forward.
Good evening. It looks like a very clever use of space and a great place to have mixed-use housing and commercial, as long as the commercial still works out in the future, and accessible residential. I do have some questions. You mentioned the biological and the EIR, and there's a really beautiful old bay tree on the property. I'm wondering if there's any chance at all of saving the bay tree somehow. I'm also wondering, and I'm not up to speed with the requirements of the DSP, so I don't know if this is included anyway, but I'm wondering about the requirements for stormwater runoff, for example, permeable paving, maybe rainwater catchment, and solar roofs. And then looking at that picture up there, I'm wondering if that's based on the real size, the actual size of Charles Street, because it seems to be showing cars parked on the west side of Charles Street and the east side. And right now cars do park on the east side, but there's just a big ditch on the west side and very rarely cars parking there. It looks narrower than that in real life. So I'm wondering what the plans are for the street, with the idea that there would be parking on both sides and access in and out on Charles Street. I think that's it. Thank you. Oh, also there's no sidewalk on the west side of Charles Street right now, so
Right.
how would that work?
Thank you.
I can jump in and answer the last part of that.
Sure.
This is the new improved Charles, at least up to our property line. We would be putting in new curb, street gutter, and sidewalk, and then with the city, working with the city in the public right-of-way, do landscaping in that.
Thank you.
And I did forget to mention the white roofs, solar panels, and the electronic vehicle parking on site. So we're being green in this approach too. Some of them regulated, but some of them at our client's request.
Okay, we're after 6. This is where I think I need to actually have to go at this point. So if I can turn the gavel over to the vice chair, and I need to leave. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So is there any other member of the public that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. And so just to clarify, Ms. Parker, we don't need to approve or vote on anything at this point, correct? Our comments will go in the record and...
Yes, that's correct. We're just looking for general direction, and if the vice chair would entertain an idea, I would like to maybe pose the question to the architect to just see if he has any outstanding questions for you all, or if he feels like he's gotten sufficient feedback.
Okay.
Just as before I go, I really want to say that this looks like a really cool project, and I want to see it come back here. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Morgan.
Okay, so any more questions for
No,
us, or have
no,
you
I
gotten
think-
what you need?
I think you actually gave us some really good input, some insights. We'll get those incorporated into the next iteration and bring you back the true dog and pony show in hopefully a few weeks. But we'll work with Vicki on getting back before you soon.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, do we have any reports from staff? Quickly? Oh, wait.
Quickly, just I guess the most important thing that comes to mind is that the budget was passed, adopted on Tuesday night. So there are a number of, I guess, relatively small compared to the Gateway project that we did last year, but some good pedestrian improvements projects, I should say, that were approved as part of that budget. So we're looking forward to implementing those. And we're right in the midst of doing a landscape refurbishment, I'll call it, of downtown just around the corner from here. And so getting ready for festival season. So got some really nice replanting coming. And you should be looking at final design review for the Cotati Station project, I would say in the next month. So that'll be a good project for you to see.
Okay, a quick question is, last time I went by, it seemed like the, up at the Northern Gateway, the lovely wall with the mosaic on it, it seemed like there's a chunk of it that has not been yet completed. And what's up with that?
Yes, that's true. The artist relies on students in his program, and so because of some of the delays on the project, his students left at the end of their semesters, and so we have this big gap in completing the wall, but it is still, it's going to be covered on both sides, and the bench still needs to go in, the integrated bench, so there are some components of it yet to be finished, but they're in the works.
Okay, thanks. Okay, anything from any of my colleagues? All right, then I will call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Committee Member Langberg.